Hello and welcome to another episode of Snakes Territory. I'm Jesse Friedman alongside Jack Sommers. And Jack, on Saturday, we witnessed one of the best baseball games that I've ever watched in my life. I guess that's the positive spin. The negative spin for fans around the valley is that the Dodgers won the thing for the second consecutive year. Did the Dodgers break baseball, Jack? What are your initial thoughts?
Well, the series could have gone either way, right? I mean, it was nip and tuck. Toronto has a really good team. I think they outscored the Dodgers for the whole total of the series. And those games were so close, anything could have happened. So certainly it was anything but a foregone conclusion. Kind of reminds me back in 1986, the New York Mets won 108 games in the regular season and were massive favorites over the Boston Red Sox. And, they needed a miracle in game six of the 86 series to take it to game seven. And then they were down, I think, 3-0 in game seven before they came back and won. So, in a short series, anything can happen. But the bottom line is that the Dodgers, they're a dynasty. They're in the playoffs every single year. They win the division every single year. They're frequently getting back to the World Series, and they're just getting better and better at everything else that they do. Like in addition to signing all the best top players out of Japan, um, how they're picking players, how their analytics department works together with their coaching staff, their player development system. I mean, every year they pick at last or third, second or third to last, and yet they always have a strong farm system. So they're just going from strength to strength as an organization, and it's truly terrifying to be in the same division as them.
I think you're right that the Dodgers do a lot of things well. That's something that people maybe don't like to talk about as much, where we're going to get to the payroll conversation here in a second. But yeah, the Dodgers are good at everything. It's not just that they have limitless resources and they can afford to make big mistakes, take big gambles in free agency that other teams can't afford to take, even though that might be true. They also draft really well and develop really well, and all of these other things are absolutely true. To get to the payroll piece, though, Jack, this, of course, is a conversation that has gone on for a very long time in the sport of baseball. Should Major League Baseball adopt a salary cap? We've been thinking about it, especially as of late, because the current collective bargaining agreement only has 1 year to go. And we've had a sense for a while that the owners would maybe push for a salary cap in a way that they haven't. Um, that certainly seems on the table. And after the Dodgers go back to back, I mean, that has to just add fuel to the fire, right? I mean, the Dodgers, of course, led all of baseball in payroll once again this past season. Not necessarily by a huge margin. It depends on which website you're looking at. I know they calculated at different times and whatnot. I think Spot Track says the Dodgers were just a couple $1 million above the Mets, but this has been a point of conversation for a long time, Jack. And you feel like with the Dodgers going out and doing what they did, establishing themselves as a dynasty even more than they ever had before, maybe we're headed toward a pretty ugly CBA negotiation a year from now.
Yeah, I mean, anytime we talk about a salary cap, of course, you have to also talk about a salary floor. And when you do the math, you realize how high that floor needs to be. And it's just very difficult to imagine Major League Baseball restructuring to a degree that would allow them to revenue share to allow a team like the Marlins or the Pirates or the A's to approach that salary floor without putting themselves into massive debt. Um, yes, a lot of these teams could spend more, but it's not by as much as a lot of people think. A lot of people have been looking at the flawed metric of uh, payroll as a percentage of revenue. But that's not really an accurate measure. One thing you'll notice is if you look at that, if you simply deduct payroll from revenue, most teams are at about 200 million. There's the Diamondbacks last year were a lot less than that, and some teams were a bit more. But like nobody's only at 400 million, like revenue minus payroll, $400 million. Nobody's got that kind of uh, buffer there. So
Yeah.
if you total major league payroll is what, 5.6 billion. So just round up and say 6 billion divided by 30 teams. That averages $200 million, right? So you would need to have a salary floor of something like 175 million to have a cap of 225. And in order to force, the 15 or so teams that are below 175 up to that number, they would just have to so radically restructure revenue sharing. And of course, that's what the players would demand because they don't want to get a smaller piece of the pie. If you have a cap without a high and valid floor, then all you're doing is reducing the total take that goes to the players. So I don't see a salary cap getting implemented because I don't see Major League Baseball completely restructuring their revenue sharing to the point that it would allow for a high enough floor. At the same time, I think that we're probably headed for a lockout and a work stoppage. How long it lasts, I don't know. I don't know what concessions everyone's going to be expecting to get out of that. But unfortunately, I believe that's what's in our future.
Just to add some perspective to this, Jack, just looking at payrolls from 2025, I mentioned the Dodgers around 350 million. At least that's what Spot Track has. If you look at the bottom of the list, it was the Miami Marlins at $67 million. So that's a spread of almost 300 million between your top team and your bottom team. The Dodgers spent more than 5 times as much on their roster than the Miami Marlins in 2025. You compare that to other major sports, Jack, the NBA. This is from Hoops Hype payrolls this 2025-2026 season. The lowest is the Brooklyn Nets at 140 million. The highest is the Cavaliers at 232. The NFL, they have a range of 261 to 320 over at Spotrac. And again, take those numbers with a grain of salt. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on how the cap works in those other sports. But anyone saying that baseball is not very different in the way that it operates, it is, I mean, the numbers are very clear here. Like the spread in the other major sports in the United States is nothing compared to what it is in baseball. And I think that's a problem. I think that ultimately you want every team to have a shot at winning, right? I mean, you want the playing field to be relatively level. And yes, are there owners out there that absolutely should be spending more than they are? For sure. But at the same time, are we really expecting a world where every owner is going to operate with equal desire to spend? I just don't. I mean, even if owners generally were more willing to spend than they are, you're never going to get the same level of desire from all 30. It's just not going to happen. And that's why I think some structure is necessary, even if you were able to get some of those, teams like the Pirates and the Marlins to step up.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, if we want to talk about everyone having a chance to win, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and Tom Brady and the Patriots would like to have a word. Um, it's no guarantee that just because you have a very well structured payroll system where you have cap and floor, that you're not going to end up with very frequently seeing the same teams in the championship games. Look, baseball's dealt with this on and off throughout its history. Of course, you had the Yankee dynasties from the 1920s up until the 1960s. And then they had another dynasty, kind of mini dynasty, from 1976 through 79, 81. And in 1996 to 2000, they won 4 World Series, and went to the World Series between 96 and 2003. How many times did they go? Like 7 times. So this periodically happens in baseball. And we've actually, prior to the last 2 years, I mean, when was the last time we had a repeat champion?
Yeah.
Right. Right? It'd been a very, very long time before since we had a repeat World Series champions. So, right now, I think though it's very legitimate to feel like, yes, but this is just the beginning of Dodger dominance and dynasty, and there's nothing to stop them. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we saw them struggle with outfield and production from the outfield. Kyle Tucker is going to be a Dodger. I mean, he just is.
All right. Wow. Jack is just going out and declaring it. Kyle Tucker. You might as well just put the jersey on now. Uh, yeah. I mean, I think for a long time, Jack, people have been, especially in the baseball media world, like you talk to people who've been around baseball for a long time and ask them the question, does baseball need a salary cap? I think you'll kind of get a mixed bag of answers. Like within the baseball media world, I don't think there's a clear consensus that this is necessary because of what you mentioned. It's not like we've had the same team winning the World Series over and over and over again. That just has not been the reality in the sport. But at the same time, I think baseball is just sort of naturally immune to that in a way where there's a lot of randomness once you get to the playoffs. I mean, we've said it for a long time. The Major League Baseball playoffs are kind of a crapshoot. Once you get in, anything can happen. And I think that's sort of been baseball's saving grace in this payroll thing, this salary cap or lack thereof, not being a huge deal because it's like, well, once they get to the playoffs, anything can happen anyway. So I guess it's okay. But I don't like that explanation. I still think that regardless of how many times a team is winning in a 5 or 6 year span or whatever it is, I still think there's something to be said for just the principle of the thing. Like teams should be spending around the same amount of money on their roster. It's just common sense. I don't think it has to. I don't think it has to depend on, oh, a team went out and won 5 in a row, so thus we need to make this change. I just think it's only logical that we shouldn't have some teams spending 5 times as much on their rosters as we have from other teams.
I agree that it shouldn't be 5 times, but at the same time, how is it logical to expect small markets to spend as much as big markets?
Right.
And it's also kind of be careful what you wish for, because like if all those small market teams have to spend all their money just trying to keep up with the salary floor, well, the Dodgers and other big market teams are just going to outspend them in every other area. They're going to buy up all the best personnel. They're going to overpay for the best coaches, the best analytics staff, the best international scouting. I mean, they'll squeeze out those advantages um, even more so than they do now. So I don't know. I mean, I just think I hate to say it. Look, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a salary cap, but I just feel like everyone wants to take the simplistic approach and isn't dealing with the complexity of the issue.
Yeah.
And the complexity of the issue is way beyond what I see the public discourse around the issue being. It's not cut and dried. It's not black and white.
Yeah. That's a very fair point. I think in my head it's pretty cut and dry that a salary cap makes logical sense, but the task of actually figuring out like, okay, what is the salary cap? What is the salary floor? How are we going to get a team that's spending $70 million this year to suddenly spend 150 next year? There are a lot of questions here, Jack, and I think one of the one of the really complicating factors in baseball is that revenue is more localized than it is in other sports. Some teams have really massive local TV contracts. That's not really a thing, at least not to the same degree in other sports where there's so many nationally televised games. Teams are sharing the revenue from those broadcasts a lot more than they are in baseball. And that's going to be tough. I mean, are the Dodgers going to be? How do you get the Dodgers on board with giving up their massive advantage of having just a monstrosity of a TV contract? That I mean, that's going to be a that's not going to be an easy thing to convince them of. But you could argue it makes sense that maybe we should be splitting the revenue around, and your market size shouldn't be as big of a factor as it is right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be nice if we had Wellington Mara, who was a legendary owner of the New York Giants, football Giants, and he's the one that created the roadmap for equal revenue sharing of television
Hmm.
revenues. And had he not done that, because New York was the big Kahuna, they were the biggest market, they could have dominated. And he said, "Look, no, if we're going to have a league, then we need to share all this television revenue equally." And that's why you have the NFL that you have today, and
Hmm.
why a salary cap system works. And the the television revenue and streaming revenue landscape for Major League Baseball now is so fragmented
Yes.
and so strange that I don't even know how you go about that. There's national games, there's local games, there's streaming that's equally shared. There's team streaming. It's all over the map. And so coming up with a formula that everyone will agree to. I mean, I don't know what do they need, 25 votes or whatever it is. I'm not sure how many votes they need to get something like that passed. I don't know if it's got to be unanimous. I don't know how they get all the big market teams on board with the level of revenue share that it would take to create the world that everybody seems to yearn for.
Hmm. I guess to the question that many people have talked about, Jack, like, are the Dodgers ruining baseball? Is this a Dodgers problem? I think you and I land in the same spot there with, like, the Dodgers are doing exactly what they should be doing, and that's kind of unfortunate because they're very, very good at it, but I don't think this is a Dodgers problem. I think it's just a system problem. The system allows for teams like the Dodgers to leverage the advantages that they have, and to produce great results with it. And to the Dodgers' credit, I mean, they do an amazing, amazing job, even given the advantages that they do have. So I don't think it's a Dodgers problem, Jack. I think it's just a system issue that, as you've pointed out, it's unfortunately not simple to try to fix something like this.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Mets,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Steve Cohen comes in and they spend, basically the same kind of money just about as the Dodgers, and they make the playoffs here and there, but they're not going anywhere. When was the last time the Yankees won a World Series? So look, it certainly is not the Dodgers' fault that the system that's in place is in place, and they take advantage of it. I want to just remind our listeners, or I've talked about this before. People talk about deferrals. Please remember, any money deferred in 2024 had to be put into an account by July 1st of 2025. Any money deferred out of 2025 has to be put into an account by July 1, 2026. That money's not deferred indefinitely. And a lot of times I see the commentary again on social media, not really quite grasping this fact. So, if a player like Corbin Burns has a 33.5 million average annual, but 10 million of that is deferred. Well, the 10 million from 2025 that was deferred must be in an escrow account by July 1, 2026, and so on. So it rolls over. So this money is not deferred indefinitely. Now, those escrow accounts can earn money, they can be interest bearing accounts. I'm not saying there isn't an advantage to being able to delay that money for 1 year and then also have that money accrue interest, but it's still got to be accounted for and deposited, and that's very tightly controlled by Major League Baseball. They have auditors looking at this, and teams can't mess around with it. So all that money that the Dodgers have deferred, whether it's Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman beforehand or Shohei Ohtani more recently, all of that money the very next year is whatever was deferred this year. The very next year is deposited in these escrow accounts.
I think that $350 million figure that I cited earlier for the Dodgers, it doesn't include those deferred numbers. So I think that's including $2 million as Shohei Ohtani's salary for this year, when in reality, yeah, he is costing the Dodgers not $70 million truly, because as you said, these accounts can earn interest and whatnot, but the Dodgers are having to set aside a decent portion of that money the following July. So where does this ultimately go from here? We have no idea. I think we are certainly dreading the inevitable CBA mess that is that is awaiting us next winter. But we will cross that bridge when we get there. And for the moment, we will remember that we are a Diamondbacks podcast, and we are going to talk about the Arizona Diamondbacks the rest of the way. We have a number of topics to get to: Geraldo Perdomo, some Lourdes Gurriel news, some Corbin Carroll news. We're going to intro a new segment where we talk about some advanced stats. We can do some nerding out, as we often do here on Snakes Territory. So don't go away. We'll be back right after this break.
FT fam, if you want more information about Superpower, I have real life customer Eric Kratz with us right now to explain how you're basically getting the pro experience available for everyone.
$199 is the price, and that's a discount from Superpower. That's a discount from everywhere. You get so much information from your lab test results. Christmas is coming up here soon. You can give this gift to somebody else. Health is the gift that keeps on giving.
Your blueprint activated with Superpower. Not only did Superpower reduce that price to what Kratz is talking about, just $199, but for a limited time, FT fam gets an additional $20 off with code TAKE20. Head to superpower.com and use code TAKE20 at checkout for $20 off your membership. After you sign up, they're going to ask you how you heard about them, and make sure you mention FT to support the show. Stop only reacting to health problems and start proactively improving your health based on real personalized data with Superpower.
We are back here on Snakes Territory. Time to jump into some actual Diamondbacks news. Jack, we just heard the NL MVP finalists, who those names were going to be. And somewhat as expected, Geraldo Perdomo was not among them. It was Shohei Ohtani of the Dodgers, Kyle Schwarber of the Philadelphia Phillies, and Juan Soto of the New York Mets. We've made this case before, Jack. I think there's a really strong, pretty strong argument that Perdomo should have been on this list, but I know neither of us were really surprised to hear this news.
Yeah, just by way of clarification, this whole thing about finalist, it's actually quite misleading. I mean, all the votes are cast before the playoffs start, and all they're doing is pre-releasing the top three finishers.
Yeah,
It's not like there's finalists and then there's another vote or another competition. It's all done. It's all written in stone.
right.
Who the MVP is a done deal. There's no going to be any changing of the ranking order. We just don't know what it is yet. Well, we know in the National League, Shohei is going to win it. And Schwarber's probably almost certainly going to come in second. I think for me, the biggest argument in Perdomo's favor is he's a shortstop. And, playing shortstop 161 games. He's not just a shortstop that went out there 120 games, 161 games at shortstop. That was worth 10 positional runs in WAR calculations. By comparison, Kyle Schwarber as a DH, minus 16 runs.
Yeah.
So that's a gap of 26 runs. And when Schwarber did play the field, he was -2, and Perdomo was +3 as on the fielding run. So, for defense, Perdomo was +13 and Schwarber was -18. Those are baseball reference numbers. So basically, that's a 3 WAR difference right there. So when people look at how could Kyle Schwarber, only have what was it, 4 point, what did he end up with? Sorry, 4.7 WAR when he hit 56 homers and drove in 132. Well, WAR credits him for all those batting runs. The linear weights batting runs, he gets 41. He gets +1 for base running and +1 for DP avoidance because he walks, strikes out, flies out, and hits homers. He doesn't actually hit that many ground balls. So a lot of times he manages to stay out of double plays more than the average player. But his fielding was -2 and his positional runs were -16. So, when they add it all up, his runs above replacement were 48. and that came out to 4.7 WAR. Now you look at Geraldo Perdomo. Now he had 33 batting runs compared to Schwarber's 41. And, in his case, it was very well rounded. He had an excellent on base percentage and batting average, 290, 389. He had 58 extra base hits, 100 RBIs, 94 walks. I mean, all of that counts. So his 33 batting runs are a very impressive total. Not as high as Schwarber's, but he was +3 base running, +3 fielding, and +10 positional. And his runs above replacement were 72. So that came out to 7 WAR. So essentially, and ironically, if you don't buy WAR, what you're saying is you don't buy old school thinking. And people are like, what? What are you talking about?
Get
Well,
him, Jack.
you look back in the day, catchers and shortstops back in the 50s and 60s, they would win the MVP all the time
Yeah.
when it wasn't Willie Mays or Hank Aaron, right? And maybe they didn't have the most impressive offensive numbers, but the Yogi Berras of the world, the Lou Boudreaux of the world. I mean, those guys, they won MVPs because actually back in the day, people understood the importance of up the middle defense and how hard it is to fill those slots. And if you have a guy that's producing on offense while playing above average defense at an up the middle position, that is just so enormously valuable. So that's what WAR is doing, is it's simply quantifying that value. That old school traditional value is quantified by WAR. And now the old school guys think that WAR is crap or whatever, some newfangled analytics. But it's actually saying, hey, wait a minute, you guys told us. And I remember back in the day, people were talking about OPS and they didn't care about defense in the early 2000s and when Moneyball first came out. And the traditionalists like, wait a minute, what about defense? What about playing a tough position? What about base running? And so the analytics guy said, yeah, you know what? You're right. We need to figure that out. So they went and figured it out and added it all up. And then now nobody's happy anyway. So it's just kind of ironic.
WAR has gained, I think, a lot more credibility here in the last 10 or 20 years. Like I think people do look at that when they're voting for MVP. I think they also look at OPS. And I think that there is sort of a minimum bar that you have to clear in order to really be on somebody's radar as an MVP candidate. And the fact that Geraldo Perdomo's OPS was 851, Jack, I have a sense that that was kind of his undoing in this. There's a pretty big difference between 851 and obviously 1014 for Ohtani, 928 for Schwarber, and 921 for Juan Soto. Those guys were 1, 2, and 3 in OPS pretty clearly. And yes, I do think people value defense and base running and those kinds of things to an extent. But if we're talking about the difference of, 100 OPS points, then I guess the conversation gets more interesting. I ultimately am with you, especially with regard to Schwarber, just because he is such an all or nothing. I mean, all of his value is on offense. He can't really contribute in any other way. If we're talking about the most valuable player, that seems like a critical factor. 56 homers. I know it was over 130 RBIs. He played 162 games. He really was the engine of that Phillies offense when some other guys were hurt or not producing the way they normally would. But yeah, I still would have had Geraldo Perdomo in there over Kyle Schwarber. But as you said earlier, Jack, Ohtani's going to win the thing, and that's pretty cut and dry. Neither you nor I are arguing that fact. Any other thoughts on MVP, Jack, before we transition?
I just think that had the Diamondbacks made the playoffs, it probably would have impacted this a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I think if the narrative, there would have been narrative there, like, the D-backs made the playoffs and look what this guy did to get them there. The heart and soul of the team, the leader, played every game at shortstop, put up those kinds of offensive numbers, drove in 100 or run, or, so I think that whole narrative would have taken on a life had the D-backs managed to get to the postseason. So let's not, underestimate that impact. making the postseason counts a lot.
I also wonder if the fact that Ketel Marte and Corbin Carroll are both D-backs and also both had pretty good seasons, if maybe Perdomo isn't like the clear-cut slam dunk, far and away best player on the Diamondbacks, and that makes his case a little bit more challenging. Probably shouldn't impact his case, but maybe it does. I'm still very curious how Corbin Carroll's votes will compare to Perdomo, just knowing how much bigger of a name I think Carroll is. He's obviously been around for a while, won a Rookie of the Year, was a fairly big name coming up. Perdomo, not so much. So it'll be really interesting to see. Maybe Perdomo gets way more votes than Carroll, but it wouldn't shock me if those guys are somewhere in the same range. Carroll certainly had a good season as well. Transitioning away from that, Jack, we do have some roster news that is nothing exactly earth-shattering, but it is worth mentioning that Lourdes Gurriel Jr. has, I guess, technically not opted in to his 2026 contract. We've talked about this off air. Technically, what he did is he chose not to opt out. He did not exercise his opt out, but in not exercising his opt out, I guess we can kind of say he opted in. This was not surprising, Jack. Obviously, the ACL tear. Gurriel is going to miss, we think, pretty significant time in 2026. And frankly, even if that hadn't happened, he wasn't having a particularly great season at the plate. I think I would have expected him to opt in or not opt out, however you want to say it, regardless if that injury hadn't happened.
Yeah. I mean, very simply, look, when a contract ends, there are contract options, could be a team option, player option, or a mutual option to extend that one more year, or there might be multiple options. In this case, the contract wasn't over, but he had the option to opt out. And
Right.
it's a different category. So some of the reporting on it wasn't actually phrased correctly publicly, but very simply, he didn't opt out. He stays with the Diamondbacks. I don't know. He was having a pretty darn good August. Not so much, like his OPS plus, I think was still around 94 or whatever when his season ended. But he was driving in a ton of runs. Maybe he stays hot for another 3-4 weeks. Gets his OPS plus up over 100. Closes in on a nice RBI total. Hard to say. Well, if he doesn't get hurt, what happens? I mean, before he embarked on that hot streak in August, I'm thinking, yeah, there's no way he opts out. And then as the hot streak kind of went on, well, it's not impossible. But once he got hurt, as far as how long he's going to be out, it's funny. I have one follower on X that has been sending me pictures of Lourdes working out, which he posts to his Instagram page. And, it looks like he's doing some pretty intense workouts, which seems pretty early to be doing that as intensely as he is. I mean, he had the surgery, in late August, early September, whatever. So it's only been a few months, and, he's already doing some fairly intense workout. So who knows? I mean, maybe he does come back a little earlier than we were projecting. If I get a chance to talk to Tori, I may ask him about that. Is there any optimism that he could be back, before the All-Star break or that kind of thing? They probably won't say. But it wouldn't shock me. It's just something that we're going to have to kind of keep a close eye on and see if anything pops out about, perhaps an earlier than expected return.
In other unsurprising Diamondbacks news, Jack, Corbin Carroll, he was a finalist for a Gold Glove in the outfield for the National League. He ultimately lost that race. Fernando Tatis Jr. takes the award in right field. I was not surprised by this. I know on Baseball Savant, if you look at their outs above average, Corbin is actually a little bit better. Obviously, Fernando Tatis has the better arm, and if you look over at defensive runs saved, Fernando Tatis has a pretty significant lead over there. So the defense metrics, Jack, I never gonna trust them all that much in one individual season, but I don't think this was egregious that Corbin Carroll didn't win this award. I think Tatis probably deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I always average the two. I average the two wars because they each use different defensive systems, right? Baseball Reference uses defensive runs saved, and Fangraphs uses Statcast fielding run value, which is different than OAA, by the way. They use FRV. So, the run values are different on each website. Sometimes sometimes like, it's -6 on one and +6 on the other. And like, how do they get there? Okay, well, you know what? I'm splitting the difference because I don't know if I don't watch the guy every single day, right? Like if it was a Diamondback that has that kind of split, I'm going to have a pretty good sense because I watched every inning of every game and, more than half of them live. So, I was able to maybe have a little bit more of an informed opinion there, but I don't watch the other guys every day, and so there's no way to tell. So, I find it just easier to average the two. I think that Tatis is a legitimate winner, but kudos to Corbin Carroll for improving his defense as much as he did. Um, I think the fielding run value actually was -3 on the throwing arm, which was surprising to me because we saw him make so many more better throws. So I don't know why his throwing arm came up negative. I would have expected it to be, at least break even because he did make quite a number of good throws. There were a lot of highlights of them, but that's the way he graded out over at Statcast.
Yeah, I think even though Corbin didn't win this award, and I think we agree that Tatis totally deserving. It does seem like Corbin just gets better at a variety of things year in and year out, and his defensive range in right field especially has been good ever since he broke into the majors, but it does seem like it's getting better year after year. He was at 10 outs above average this past season. He was at 10 in 2024 as well. So I guess maybe it's not an earth shattering improvement. The metrics, at least over on Baseball Savant, are pretty similar. But just with the eye test, Jack, I mean, his reads, his routes, I think he is improving as the years go on. And as long as the D-backs have him in a corner outfield spot, I mean, he's in terms of just getting to balls, Corbin Carroll is going to be one of the best defenders in all of baseball in a corner outfield spot.
Yeah, and who knows? He may end up playing center field this year. they they may move him. Wouldn't shock me. Uh, based on other moves that they end up making at the end of the day, they've always said that they don't want to mess with him and they want to keep him in right field. But towards the end of the year, they were willing to play him in center field a little bit.
Yeah.
And depending on what happens with Jake and Alec Thomas and Jake McCarthy, then who knows? Maybe Corbin Carroll ends up being your center fielder next year.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable point. I honestly hadn't even considered that. I've been thinking so much about what the D-backs will do in center field in 2026. You're very right. One solution would just be slide Corbin Carroll over to center. It's going to be easier to find a right fielder most likely than it is to find a center fielder. So maybe the D-backs are willing to go that direction. We'll see what kinds of things they say over the course of the offseason. To finish things out on this episode, Jack, we wanted to introduce a new segment that we are calling Stat Corner. Maybe we'll come up with a better name at some point. If any of you have any tips for us, let us know in the comments. Neither of us are very creative. Well, I should speak for myself. Jack is probably more creative than I am. But the idea with this segment, Jack, is to do what we do best, which is to nerd out, talk about some baseball stats. It's actually requests that we've gotten from people a number of times. I'd love to learn more about some of these metrics that you guys reference all the time. Sometimes we forget that yeah, a lot of these numbers are still newer to a lot of people. We want to make sure that everybody can understand and have access to all of these crazy things that we're thinking about all the time. So, Jack, I know where you wanted to start in this first one is just the idea of context. How it is really, really important to know not only how a player is performing in a certain way, but to measure that relative to other players around the league, not just in terms of how what is their batting average compared to somebody else's batting average, but also considering park factors and those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, I think when we talk about context, the very first thing that's really important is what is league average? What
Yeah.
is the league average for any number that we're throwing out there? Because if you don't know what league average is, or you don't have a good sense for that, um, then the number's meaningless. Like, if I said to you, Geraldo Perdomo had, an 851 OPS. Well, what does that mean? Unless you know what league average is. In 2025, American League OPS was 719, and National League OPS was also 719. So I think that's the very first thing that I would recommend to everybody. If you go to Baseball Reference and you go to seasons on the top left of their homepage, you can pull that up and then you can start looking at and see what the average is for various events, whether it's batting average or OPS or how many home runs are hit per game, how many strikeouts are there per game. All of these things are all there. And without the context, it's hard to know what is really impressive and what's not. And especially when we're talking also across years and decades. So, like one example I'm going to give in 2005, 20 years ago, 2004, the American League scored 5.01 runs per game, 5 runs per game in 2004. Team batting average was 270 and team OPS was 771. In 2025, runs per game were 4.42. More than half a run less is being scored. So simple math will tell you a run is worth more in a league that's scoring 4 runs a game than it is in a league that's scoring 5 runs a game, right? The percentage of runs being scored in that game will tell you the different value. Batting average is 244 and OPS was 719. Last year, 2024, runs per game were 4.27 and OPS was 703. So sometimes, a guy from one year to the next may look like he put up the exact same numbers, but if the league context around him changed dramatically, which it
Yeah.
kind of did from 24 to 25, then that really can impact the true value of that player's season. Um, as you mentioned, there's also park factors. And I think at the most extremes, people have a pretty good sense. Um, you know, Everyone knows that uh, hitting 300 in Coors Field is a lot different than hitting 300 in Petco Park.
Right.
Right? I think everyone has a pretty good understanding of that. But park factors change how a ballpark plays relative to the rest of the league. Sometimes they move the fences. Sometimes for an outdoor stadium, they build an extra deck, and all of a sudden it changes the wind pattern. Or they put in more seats and they reduce the size of the foul territory. Or they put in a humidor and AstroTurf that, like they did at Chase Field, that slows the ball down. Chase Field for years was known as a great hitter's ballpark, and now it's a neutral ballpark that's actually one of the toughest to homer in,
Yeah.
but it makes up for the lack of homers with a lot of extra doubles and triples. So, how does a fan get through all this? Well, the first thing you can do is you can start to peruse the pages of sites like Fangraphs and Baseball Reference and find for yourself what's league average. The second thing is you can go to their park factors pages and you can see which ballparks are inflating offense. Hello, Cincinnati. And which ballparks are suppressing offense. Hello, AT&T. Or the Mariners Park was a T-Mobile. I mean, that place, really suppresses offense. So that environment, that context matters. Now, fortunately, there are a few very basic metrics out there that help us do the math, and you often hear us refer to OPS plus and ERA plus, or WRC plus and ERA minus, which are Fangraphs metrics. And these are very simply uh, adjusted metrics that take the league average and the ballparks played. 100 equals average, and an OPS plus and ERA plus above 100 is better than average, below 100 is worse than average. So if a hitter has 130 OPS plus, that's a really good hitter. If he's a 140, 150 OPS plus, he's an all-star candidate. And if it's a 170, 180 OPS plus or higher, he might be an MVP candidate. For ERA plus, same thing. 100 equals league average. 110 is for a starting pitcher making 30 starts is above league average innings eater. 120 or 30 is a really good pitcher. A Cy Young winner might put up a 160 or a 170 ERA plus. So I would encourage everyone to embrace those metrics. They're really easy to understand. The concept of 100 is average, above is better, below is worse. It is very simple to grasp, and the math is done for you, and it really is like a quick and dirty way to get to an evaluation that takes into account the context that I'm talking about. Because without the context, a lot of numbers are deceiving. I'll give an example. When we talk about strikeout rates, the average strikeout rate percentage in Major League Baseball today is 22%. 25 years ago, it was 16%.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's a huge difference. So when a guy goes out and he puts up, 10 Ks per nine, well, so many guys are doing that nowadays. Back in 1996 or 2001, if you were putting up 10 Ks per nine, that's a phenomenal number. So things change, and it's important to keep up with the changing context of baseball.
I think baseball in particular is an evolving sport in that sense. Like I know all sports are changing over time. Like certainly the way the NBA teams are going about their business now is much different than it was 20, 25 years ago. But yeah, I mean, just these traditional baseball stats that we've been looking at for years and years, like batting average and OPS and all these different things, home runs, I guess being a big one. The numbers that we expect to see are way different now than what they were 20, 25 years ago. One example I'll throw in, I'll add to everything you said, Jack, is Aaron Judge. Him putting up an 1144 OPS, like that's an outrageous number in any era of baseball, but especially this one. Because as you said, offense now is not what it was 25 years ago. And if you put an 1144 OPS up in 2025, I mean, it's outrageous. It's a 215 OPS plus. Last year he was at 225. Like these are absurd numbers when you compare him to other players around the league. And that's really what matters. I mean, that's really what matters most and helps teams win most. It's not so much like what's your OPS compared to some great player 20 years ago. It's what's your OPS compared to all the other players in the league right now. That's how we win a lot of games. And that's why Aaron Judge is somehow probably underappreciated. He should win the MVP this year, Jack, and I'm not totally sure if he's going to. No discredit to Cal Raleigh. I mean, what Cal Raleigh's doing is amazing in its own right. But what we are seeing from Aaron Judge right now is just absurd.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I look at Paul Goldschmidt. I want to bring it back to a Diamondbacks player example.
Yeah.
In 2017, he had a 966 OPS. In 2018, he had a 922 OPS, 44 points lower. So a lot of people might think, well, he wasn't as good. His OPS plus was exactly the same, 142. Now, why is that? Because Chase Field put in the humidor, and Chase Field added the turf came in 19, but the main thing was they put in the humidor, and that suppressed offense quite a bit, and so the park factor changed. I believe the league run environment also changed. 2017 was a pretty high scoring season.
Yes.
And it came back down in 2018. I think in 2017 it was 4.58 per game, and 2018 it was 4.37. So, there were 0.21 less runs per game, and Chase Field put in a humidor and suppressed home runs and power output. So a 44 point difference in OPS ended up the same OPS plus. So it's not only evaluating a player against other players, but it's evaluating him against himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and going across years, like I'm looking at Ketel Marte's page right now. I mean, Ketel had an 893 OPS this year. That translated to a 145 OPS plus. So 45% better than league average. Whereas that 2017 season from Goldie that you referenced, he had a 966 OPS, which on the surface sounds way higher than Ketel's 893 from this past year. But again, you look at the OPS plus, Ketel's 2025 actually is better than Paul Goldschmidt's 2017. Well, once you factor in the park factors and the league environment and all those things. So we could go on. We could give all sorts of other fun examples of this. But all that to say, Jack, I think this is why on our show when we're evaluating players, you guys will often hear us reference OPS plus, ERA plus, those kinds of things, as opposed to just regular old OPS and ERA, the non-adjusted stats. It's not that we never look at those. I absolutely still look at those. I'm still gonna, I still have a decent feel for like how good an 800 OPS is, right? I mean, it's not like we're never allowed to talk about these numbers, but if we're really trying to do like some hardcore analysis and figure out whether a guy is worth such and such amount of money or whatever, if we're trying to dig in deep, those park adjusted, league adjusted stats, all of the plus stats are really, really helpful for doing that.
Agreed.
Is there anything we missed, Jack? Anything you wanna add to that before we move on and I guess wrap things up here for today?
I will just mention that Fangraphs does things a little bit differently on ERA, which can be annoying for some. Instead of using ERA plus at Fangraphs, they use ERA minus.
Right.
And their
right.
concept is lower should be better when it comes to ERA. So but also the math actually is a little bit better.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, the math is more linear, where 10 points actually equates to 10 percentage points better. So if somebody has a 70 ERA minus, he's actually 30% better than the average. Whereas if somebody has a 130 ERA plus, it's not quite 30%. It's different by a little bit. I think it's more like 28 or 27. So the numbers can be a little bit different there.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
a good call.
just a minor thing. There are people that prefer to use Fangraphs. There are people that prefer to use Baseball Reference. I prefer to use both and homogenize the two and take the best from both worlds. But just be aware that for ERA, they do use ERA minus over there.
Well, if you made it this far, we really appreciate you being here with us on this episode of Snakes Territory. You apparently enjoyed our Nerd Fest enough to stick around, so we appreciate it. If you haven't already, be sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you in the comments. We'll do our best to get around and respond to some of you as best we can. You can find us on social media. I am at Jesse N. Friedman. Jack is at ShoeWizard59. And our show is at Snakes Territory. And of course, when you subscribe to our channel, be sure to hit the bell, sign up for notifications so that you never miss an episode. We'll have 2 shows a week coming through the remainder of the off season. So we're not going anywhere, even though there is sadly no more baseball to be played. I guess if you count the Dominican Winter League, Jordan Lawler's still going to be playing some games. Well, we'll talk about that for sure. But thank you to all of you for being with us on this episode. We really appreciate it. And I guess I should also mention you should find Jack's written work as well over at si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks/on-SI. His partner in crime, Alex D'Agostino, is doing some great work over there. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Thanks again for being with us on this show. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back with another edition of Snakes Territory very, very soon.